Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 4 of Podcasting with the Libertarian Party of India. So, if you haven't seen episodes 1, 2, and 3, I suggest you go right back and watch them before you watch this one. We have been going up the levels with each set of questions. This is the final segment in the initial 4-set series. So, stay tuned for another episode on a host of other issues after this. So, again, welcome to the Podcasting with the Libertarian Party of India. Let's get started. So, question number 16 in this episode of episode 4. So, we have talked about a lot of things, including infrastructure and all of that. But now, let's talk a little bit about implementation. How would like a political scenario like India, as it is existing now, transition into a libertarian one? What has to be done for the country to change its current mindset and move towards, what is going to happen if a libertarian government needs to be set up?
So let's address what makes people believe you and what makes people don't believe you. So two things have very good track record of making people believe them. First of all is actual evidence in front of people, and second one is no, let's say three things. First one is when you have actual evidence to show that demonstrably proof that this is actually exists or this actually works.
Like a
Second
word
one
of
is
mouth, right? Yeah.
no, word of mother,
Oh,
actual
okay.
demonstration,
Actual,
actual
okay.
like
Like
the
what
actual
Javier,
demonstration.
well, like what Javier Milei has done. We have proof
Yeah,
that it
yeah,
actually works.
like how it is doing. Second one is when a person gains sufficient authority that and when he says something that people start believing him. So all these so-called experts or PhDs or something, when they something that say something, or someone who is very well renowned, some influencer, I won't name that crazy man. So yeah, when he says something, people start believing that he did this, so he definitely is saying something. So yeah, second one is there, and third one is when a lot of people surrounding them say something, they start believing that as well. These three things works are definitely either change people's belief or build belief in something that they didn't know before. So what how do we come into play? How do we intend to take advantage or prove that our system works? On the anecdotal aspect, we can put the example of Argentina, but something that is more and now talking about evidence. Anecdotally, Argentina is a good example, but talking in terms of what tangible thing that they can have before they vote libertarian decide that yeah, let's give them a chance, what can be done? So I thought that since we are so into entrepreneurship and we want to prove we want to prove the power of free market. Let's build a free market system before as much we can build as much possible before to it as much we can before getting into power as much possible, and showing people that this system and this system actually works. So what we did was we have started a platform called the Real Free Market, which is basically trying to build, which is basically a platform for social or facilitating social entrepreneurship. So someone wants to start a venture in education, or maybe he wants to start a venture in recycling, or some basically problems that are social justice or maybe civic in nature, like cleanliness, sanitation, or something. So basically, the problems which people expect the government to solve, road repair, the people expect the government to solve this problem. You would never have heard of a road repair company or a lake repair company or things like that are civic in their nature. We are trying to build what we are trying to do and try to do. The platform is trying to do is that any individual who is interested in solving these problems, he can raise either he can either run a fundraiser campaign to solve the problem by hiring other people, or maybe he starts a campaign where he recruits other members who feel the same problem and want to solve it. And this is how the market operates as well. You want to solve a problem, you either raise funds, you make other people join on equity or whatever they value that you value common values that you hold. They come together and try to attempt to solve a problem. Giving a simple example, one of private initiative and second one of collective action. So private initiative, Rajivendra Singh Shekhawat, if I remember the name right, that guy in Rajasthan, he near that guy, he's a hotelier and he's into hospitality. He's a well-to-do guy. So what he did was basically bought a land, dry patch of land near Jaipur that was completely putting up his own money. He first acquired the land, then he basically worked on the water management system. So there were small patches where water accumulated, and there were large patches where there was no water. So the entire land was barren. So basically, he flattened the land, built a lake, and then built the surrounding ecosystem. So basically, I'll share the video when we put out the video. Share the
Sure.
link. Yeah. So
Yeah.
basically, what ended up happening was a patch of land that basically looked barren. It became green and flourishing, and no one could say that it exists in a desert. And he didn't even rely on the government to bring uh, some additional water or something. He just better managed rainwater and the water that had already existed. So this is what he did. Now the second example is that of I don't know whether it was some place in Karnataka. There was a local lake that was basically dying out. Earlier, it was a tourist spot, but now the lake had turned so dirty and all that people had stopped visiting it. Those living in the vicinity, or maybe parents or the living in that area, got concerned that we cannot let this happen. And what they basically did was that first of all, they put the proposal in first of the municipality. That's what naturally everyone does. That let the government solve it. And the government municipality said that it would require some huge crore figure, that it would require 2 or 3 crores to solve the problem, and rejected their proposal, and just said, yeah, rejected basically means, yeah, someday we will do it. So now the parents decided that let's go our own way, do crowdfunding campaign and solve the problem on our own. So uh, basically they raised some 30 lakh or some amount to solve the problem. And here also you can see that how government creates more problem than it solve it. They had to rely on the permissions that the IS officer gave them to clean up the lake that existed in their own area. They required some IAS officer who was hardly there, who would hardly stay there for 2 or 3 years. They required his permission to do it. Now, when the permissions took the longest time, anywhere you need to do something good, permissions take the longest time. Yeah. So anyhow, the permission took the longest time, and then they would come on weekends. They would bring in volunteers and start cleaning up lake. And I think 7 or 8 months they cleaned up the lake, and it was as good as new. And when they cleaned up the lake, all the birds and all, they came back. To migratory birds who used to come to the lake, they also came back as well. Basically, the entire ecosystem was restored. So what I am trying to demonstrate by this is that lot of the problems private sector can solve and private initiative can solve, and there is no common platform that is enabling such, that is speeding up the current system relies on one great man taking all the responsibility to solve the problem.
One father of the nation who's
Yeah,
supposed to.
basically several great men come to need to prop up everywhere to solve the problem, and they too need to be extremely motivated to solve the problem. What we are trying to do is let's build a common platform where all these stupid obstacles are removed, and we focus on the real problem. Cleaning the lake using a technology for it is a real problem that needs to be solved. A technology needs to be built, a method needs to be thought of. But getting the permission to clean the lake shouldn't be an issue, or the greening of the area shouldn't be an issue. So what we are trying to do is that let's speed up the market process, build a common platform, learn from the examples of those who have already solved it, and do it in your area. When such a common resource exists and a common platform exists, the problems will start solving much more faster. And since it is a Libertarian Party initiative, people realize that when let's suppose X person comes in and we come in and we say that we have actually solved the problem for you, let's get rid of this step, which only by getting in the government we can solve your problem
Yeah,
much
what
better.
I really love about this is, see, there are people who are general people who are willing to put in money, in terms of the crowdfunding. They're willing to give money so that this problem can be solved, and there are people who are willing to help in terms of
Yeah,
just volunteer. Like, this is how good people actually are in India. You know what I mean? Like, this is how a society can actually work together, like at the grassroots level, to raise the quality of life in their own neighborhood. And unfortunately, it's not happening because of because of that fear, I think, as well, of that external influence that happens, including the licensing that was required for the lake.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying that I keep repeating that we are currently living in the relics of the colonial government that existed before us, who existed before 1947. Those who are operating the machine have changed, but the nature of the machine hasn't changed a lot. So that's why it's such a because see, this would make sense if some external force existed and it had control over your resources, but it doesn't. But this doesn't make sense. I want to say that we say that this right now we are ruled by Indians, but how are the same people who are amongst us creating problems for us? This doesn't make sense. So this naturally means that that this institution isn't Indianized and
Yeah.
it is still a foreign
It's basically
institution.
the people who want to help can't help
Yeah.
in the system. They can't
Yeah.
provide any value to this system because there's always this red tape surrounding almost everything. I get that.
Yeah, that's why we are trying to build a platform that actually demonstrate that basically gives an outlet to people. Yeah, this is the
So is
direction that
this
you can follow.
platform already operational? Is it can
We
people
have
join it?
started we have started the social media, but we will and Himanshu is working on developing the platform.
So the
And this is the
platform is
website, and
currently under development, and
yeah,
we should
it's
expect.
currently under development, and we will be rolling it out this year, and we have big plans for it. Basically, party activism won't be narebazi and all that unproductive stuff. We would be focusing on actually solving problems by free market mechanism.
Right. So continuing on with this trend, let's go to the 17th question in this episode, which is, so how do we engage with voters now? Like, who most of them are obviously going to be skeptical of the libertarian ideals. I mean, they're going to, how is it going to work in this complex country like India, whatever? So, is this example going to help, or how are voters going to be swayed by something like this in a country like this?
Yeah, the free market to a large extent would help in charging up the voters. But talking in terms of policies that would excite the voters. See, I wasn't surprised by the popularity of freebies
Right.
because it isn't that the basically here is where evidence comes in that people are much more interested in having 2,500 or whatever amount they get in hand as compared to some indirect scheme where they don't know how much what the actual cost of running that scheme is. What we need to do is that basically let's assume that for a moment assume that let's suppose that socialists are good hearted people. Let's assume that, and let's suppose that the objectives that they are trying to achieve are desirable to be achieved. So basically they are basically their objective ideology basically is that without material equality or material without the basic objective that without material well-being political freedom is of no use. This is their basic so let's put the resources all the resources that we have for the material well-being of all the people. Sounds noble, all right. So you're trying to achieve the material well-being of the people. But we know that capitalism and free market is the best way to achieve those objectives. All right. So, but telling people that you need to work hard doesn't get you elected. So what can be done? Policies can be changed to such a way that they achieve the same objectives that socialists are trying to achieve, but they will never be able to conceive it. So let's take the example of this freebie. Makes simply no difference to the overall finances of I don't think any household in the country.
Right.
But it is much more preferable to any indirect scheme that you will never be using anyway. So government giving you cash is not a is much more desirable. So what can be done? How can we do it better? So what we can do is that let's get rid of all the indirect schemes and move in the direction of consumer choice. Basically, in the education, we talked about vouchers. For ration, it can be vouchers as well. Basically, introduce as much element of consumer choice as possible, and
Food
for
as well, right? Food as well.
food as well. Yeah, so as many vouchers and as many direct consumer choice elements as much possible. Keeping in mind the principle of consumer choice, let's build our policies around it. So this is where vouchers fit in. This is where lending societies fit in, and this is where lending societies fit in. Basically, a political policy innovation around the ideas of consumer choice rather than political choice. So, uh, slashing the budgets of all the indirect schemes is sufficient to fund direct schemes. Also, additionally, what has never been tested before is since we are operating in a very different technological environment as compared to 30 years or maybe 20 years. Nowhere in history was it possible to directly transfer into to 400 million accounts. Any amount wasn't possible to be directly at a click of a button. You couldn't send any money to for 400 million accounts or maybe 800 million accounts. It wasn't possible,
Right.
but now it's possible. New policies need to be thought of so that this technology can be taken advantage of. What we can do, what need to be proposed is that instead of these paltry sums of 2,000 all, uh, I think any amount near 1 lakh is doable by most of the states per female for which here is why financial innovation comes in. The first level of innovation is direct transfer, and second level of innovation is lending. Uh,
Right.
since banking system has extended to via UPI and all the government emphasis on banking, the banking services have extended to the lowest of the grassroots. So what can be done is that we introduced different sort of loans, something like government. Let's suppose that the government of Haryana decides that we will do a 1 lakh FD for all the females in our state, and against that FD, those females can claim a loan of that amount or whatever amount. Like I think that 1 lakh FD would have some amount of 80 or 90,000 rupees. That loan that they can use to finance either finance a business or all their activities, and that they need to repay. And when they repay that loan, either their limit will increase, for they can borrow greater amounts, or basically treating each individual as a small business and opening up the financial line for him so he can improve his life, and rest of it.
It's also the country utilizing their individual skills as well, right?
Yeah, definitely. There was a recent study in Africa, where in Kenya, where a remote village, a 10 million, it was a $10 million study, where uh, huge amount of $10 million was handed out to in villages, and people. It was village A got the money and village B got nothing, and it was observed that it didn't create inflation as such, but increased demand. A lot of the problems exist because underutilized demand due to a lack of better financial infrastructure, and financial infrastructure, we have accidentally have built the basics for it, and we just need to utilize it better. And we as libertarians would focus on easing up and smoothing of the financial system as much as possible for more people to experiment and innovate, and feel a sort of a safety net that yeah, everything all right, next year I'll get to try again, I'll get to try again. This is what can be done, and it is financially feasible, and it won't create any problems for fiscal problems for the government. And so this is what can be done, and this if we are able to explain to people that this can actually be done, and they will definitely, I am 100% sure that they will prefer 1 lakh in hand to 2100 in
Yeah,
hand per month.
yeah. This is amazing because just I mean 2100. Hello. Ah,
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah. I mean 2100. What can you do with it? You can't mobilize your life. You can't like exponentially. You can't do anything with that money. Literally, you can buy a couple of gas cylinders, maybe. That is
Yeah,
about
so
it. Yeah.
yeah, such poultry amounts wouldn't change anything. And although they may quote vague statistics like the income is 10,000, the average income is 10,000, we added 15% to it or 20% to it, so we increased income by 20%. No, you didn't increase anything.
Yeah, it's like that if the cost to buy a vote through other means will anyway cost like 10,000 rupees. But if you give a person 2,100 and say, okay, vote for me, it is a
Yeah, so
cheap buy of a note. Like, it doesn't show any actual skill from the government in terms of anything, really.
yeah, so basically, I'm trying to say that people have stupid ideas of libertarianism, that it is about Jungle Raj and everyone
Right.
for himself or something. Yeah, all the
That reminds
there are
me, our
policies.
next series is going to be myth busting. So once this series is over, our next series is going to be myth busting. So that is where all these elements are going to come in. Like we're going to bust those myths and we're going to tell people
Yeah.
what
Yeah, so
libertarianism is all about.
yeah, so a lot of myths are around that the Libertarian Party would be proposing such stupid policies. No, we are here to win elections, and we are here to solve problems. So definitely we would be moving in. We would definitely try to propose policy. So basically, we can attain objectives that the socialists aim to achieve much better. But earlier, the problem, my diagnosis is that earlier the problem that liberalism faced was technology hadn't to the caught up to the speed that uh, uh, hadn't caught up. You could grow really fast. That's why Milley was really amused that how did country go from this to that in such a because speed of action has changed a lot.
So libertarianism was ahead of its time, basically. It was way ahead of its time when it was first proposed, right?
Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is that we have a new technological framework in which we need to rethink libertarian principles and how we can libertarian policies that can attain the objectives that liberalism tried to achieve much faster and outcompete all those wannabe socialists who are just here to loot people and
Right.
steal their money.
That brings me to the 18th question, which is basically what historical figures does the Libertarian Party of India get its inspiration from, right? Like what is the history? I'm sure it's a rich history. Like where in terms of, just looking for inspiration from yourself or from the party's perspective, who were these people? Who are these figures? Who are these examples that we draw inspiration
First,
from?
first figure that I would like to quote is Mahatma Gandhi.
Okay.
Although others may disagree, but I think to a certain extent he agreed some of the principles, and maybe hypothetically, if he comes back somehow, he would definitely agree to our program more because first of all, are the basic principle of libertarianism, that is the
Non-aggression.
non-aggression principle. That was his fundamental principle as well. Then starting with it, his second principle was decentralization. Decentralization, the village republics, his emphasis on village. We also emphasize on decentralization, that local bodies and municipalities are much more important. And then another judicial reforms. He too opposed that let people solve problem on their own rather than relying on the colonial machinery. Then his focus on Swaraj or Swatantrata, that self reliance. Now, self-reliance, the Congress Party molded its meaning to country becoming self-reliant. But I think Gandhi would much more agree on individual becoming self-reliant.
Right.
And when the right argument that is made that it is better, division of labor is much better at producing self-reliance than the 1% doing everything. So here it comes into play. So I think the first figure is Mahatma Gandhi, and then we have figures like Chakravarti Rajagopalachari who were believers in the market, and we have Meenu Musani and all these all. But first figure that we should talk about is Mahatma Gandhi.
Okay.
Although I'm
But
talking
Mahatma
about principles,
Gandhi,
not about.
correct, I get that. But Mahatma Gandhi also would have been exposed to libertarian books at some point, right? I mean, I'm sure he would have had a
No,
look.
the
No, he wasn't? Okay.
no li- libertarianism started developed in 60s and 70s. So by that time, Mahatma Gandhi was gone.
Okay.
Liberal
Right.
principle existed at their time, but
Right.
libertarianism that we have developed is comes into existence in 60s and 70s. That's why we are accused of being foreign because Mises, and Rothbard, and all these Hoppe, these all are in operated from Friedman, Milton Friedman. All these existed in the United States. But what needs to be accounted is that the Marxist intelligence in India basically killed all those who didn't agree with them. They shunned them, ran them away from the town, ran them away from the university. So the principle simply couldn't be developed here. So it isn't that India doesn't have a history of principles, but it definitely lacks a school of thought that would have systematically developed and propagated the philosophy. That is where we lacked, and that is why the Swatantra Party couldn't survive the onslaught of Swatantra Party. It is rarely talked that by 1965 it had almost 40 seats in the Lok Sabha I mean 10% or 15% of the seats in Lok Sabha of earlier the Lok Sabha used to be all smaller as well. It wasn't 545 from the start, so it was popular and definitely got votes. And its policy program was small government, free market, and basically similar to somewhere between conservatives and libertarians. So that was their policy program. So we have some existence, and they people voted for them. But since they couldn't develop the philosophical framework and couldn't hire new talent, because all the talent went to either to nationalist or to Marxist. That's why Swatantra Party suffered a talent crunch and got wiped out by Indira Gandhi. So, but I think that right now winds are much more in our favor as compared to any time in history.
Yeah, right now I think everybody has started to realize that there is a serious issue with their lives right now. You know, they're all waking up almost in unison. All of a sudden, we can see it all around. We can see a bit of unrest, which we haven't really seen in a while. You know, there's a lot of unrest in that. So brings me to, okay, how does the 19th question, which is how does the Libertarian Party want to use innovation and technology to drive the goals home? Like what can be done using tech and innovations, because innovation is lacking these days. We don't even have our own cell phone manufacturer, if I'm not wrong. Like we don't have an Apple in India for some reason, even though we are probably one of the biggest consumers of a mobile phone in the world. We don't have a Ramaswamy phone, or I don't know what you want to call it, but we don't have anything like that right now. Like, where is the innovation gone, and how is Libertarian, is it going to change this aspect of things, the tech and innovation aspect of things?
Well, talking in terms of innovation in governance, I'll cover that as well. But a lot of these, how we can facilitate information, how the party will facilitate innovation by easing up credit and getting out of the way of in the form of deregulation.
Right.
So this is how we will facilitate. So easing up credit, as we all know that 2000, how the internet was. How the internet boom was facilitated by the low interest rates that existed in the United States, and that was called free money and zero interest phenomena. So it was all a demonstration that people get way more risk taking and try crazy ideas when borrowing rates are much lower. So easing up the financial sector will definitely solve that problem. It isn't saying that we will come and put the interest rates at zero, but definitely we will ease up the regulation so that different sectors will have different interest rates and different borrowing costs to operate in, and they can decide what is good for them based on market information. This is where finance comes in, and when sufficient finance comes in, people can experiment and tinker and scale all the solution that whatever solution that they have built. A lot of the getting rid of tariffs will help as well, because we can import best of the equipment best in the world from places best in the world. So that will solve the problem of innovation as well. But talking in terms of innovation in governance, so it isn't talked about much, and I think it will gain some traction in future. The problem of direct democracy, representative democracy is a phenomena of is a tech problem, not a yeah, basically it is a tech problem, because you cannot have billions of people voting every day. It isn't financially feasible, because the technology doesn't exist to do that. So decentralization will solve a lot of the problem. And now where technology comes in is that for direct democracy, or how technology comes in. So Taiwan has built things. Taiwan had a very, how would you call it, a real technological innovator as its technology minister. I don't know what the exact name of the ministry is. It's some technology ministry. So what he built, the system that he built was that suppose Uber wants to come in your area, and you have different concerns regarding Uber will come in and how this will affect my interest. So basically, they built a platform in such a way that the politicians put forth a proposal that we should let Uber come in, and different people vote yes, no, why, yes, and they put their no or yes and they put a why. So what ends up happening is that suppose this is the line and people are somewhere on this side of the graph or this side of the graph. So these are the no's, these are the yeses, and these are the whys, and these are the degrees to which they know. So whatever different issues they have, the policy is molded that we will let Uber come in on these conditions.
Right.
So these conditions, so his interest is taken into account. Now this person, this thousand, maybe few hundred people share this interest, few hundred people share this interest. All these parties dialogue and come to a conclusion that we will let Uber come in under these conditions. So this can happen only when you have sufficiently advanced technology that can take all the feedback and resolve all the disputes and come to a common agreement.
Right.
This is the platform that they have built. I'll share the video of this as well.
Okay.
He put forth a TED talk for it. So this is the innovation that can be introduced in policy forming and keeping the interest of different parties aligned. So this is one of the innovations that we can introduce in governance. Other innovations being blockchain. I think the government is working on blockchain for land records.
Right.
And land records and contract enforcement via contracts via blockchain. So these are the innovations that we can introduce in governance for
Yeah.
faster.
Even with blockchain, I think we lost a lot of time, because everybody thought just blockchain is just one thing you can. But now look at its applications. It's applicable literally anywhere.
Yeah, because it is trying to do achieve one of the features of the feature of governance, that is record keeping, and that predates to the Egyptian times where the scribes used to keep records. So record keeping is one of the central features of government, and it is a monopoly of the government because only one trust is very important, and only government wants to
Have
keep
that.
monopoly over it.
Right.
Technology will solve a lot of these problems.
So this brings us to the 20th question of the series, and this is the last question of this episode 4 as well. So the final thing is, what are the challenges you're anticipating right now in implementing the entire vision of this party? And are there any thoughts on how you would overcome them? What is the entire gamut of things going to be from a bird's eye view? Like how do you see it happening?
My targets are that talking in terms of so first of all, what are my targets and what are the obstacles that I see? The targets that I see is that by the end of this year we reach somewhere around 10,000 followers on Twitter, and we have some audience of around similar audience on YouTube, because YouTube audience grows much quicker than Twitter audience, since audience
Right.
base is much slower than Twitter. So, yeah, so we have a good social media presence, and our party is registered, and we have started student wings in the major 2 or 3 major cities and their universities. So I'm audible.
Now you're audible. Hello. I think it's got cut. Tushar, can you hear me?